A lot of you have been asking for an explanation about the RIF process, so here goes. This is a lot more than I can do in one video, so I'm going to put them all together in a playlist as I finish them. Just a reminder, I'm an attorney, but I'm not your attorney, and this is not legal advice. This is for informational purposes only. I'm putting this information and the source materials out there so that you guys can look at it. And if you find that you're getting involved in a RIF and they're not following the proper procedures and they're doing something to violate your rights, you can take that information and go to an actual attorney or go to your union or file a grievance with the MSPB and hopefully get that resolved. And if you do think they're violating your rights in some way, you have to act fast, because when you're a subject to these RIFs, you only have a short window of time to file a grievance. It is 30 days from the adverse action, so the clock is ticking. You need to get the retention register that I mentioned in the previous video, look at which category you were put in, see if it's accurate, and see if other people's description are accurate and if they followed all the right procedures, and if not, you need to act quickly. So I'm putting this info out there so that you'll know roughly how it works, to know if they're taking shortcuts or doing other things that are going to affect your rights. So I'll break this up into sections, as I said, and we'll start now. This is from Reduction in Force, a practitioner's guide, and a few different people uploaded versions of this to a website called Slideshare, and I'll link to it in the description so you can check it out on your own. So what is a RIF? It's a reduction in force, and it's used by the employing agency for the release of an employee from his or her competitive level by furlough, more than 30 days separation, demotion, or reassignment. And that is the bump and retreat stuff I talked about in a different video, requiring displacement when that release is required because of lack of work, shortage of funds, insufficient personnel ceiling, reorganization, etc., etc. It doesn't mention anything in there about deranged billionaire on stage with a chainsaw, but let's assume that that's part of this. So you'll notice it says competitive level highlighted, and why is that? Because the accepted service, which are political appointees, are not going to be part of this, of course. So in a RIF, in the competitive service, you will compete against other people, and you'll be ranked in your retention register against other people in the competitive service, not the accepted service. And in layman terms, a RIF is the government says who stays and who goes. So how does the competition work? I went over that briefly in another video, but we'll go over it here. So it happens in a specific piece of one agency, and specific group of employees compete with each other within the practice groups. And I'll give you an example from my agency. So we used to have an office in Minneapolis, and I worked for one of the financial regulators, and we had an office in New York, Kansas City, Chicago, wherever there were financial exchanges. And there used to be something called the Minneapolis Grain Exchange in Minneapolis. So we had a few employees there. And then when they closed that exchange, there were no need for those employees. So they were RIF'd. And when I say the competitive area, so because that they closed that whole office, everyone there was RIF'd, and they couldn't use their bumper retreat rights to take a job in the Chicago office or the New York office. They were just given severance or VERA. And if they had closed part of an agency, like if New York had closed part of it and RIF'd a bunch of people, then those people could compete with other people in New York. But because this whole office was closed, everyone was let go. They do have some rights. And this is from OPM. This is something called CTAP and ITCAP. And that is when you apply for a job at another agency or your same agency, you would get priority over other applicants. So if there was a job opening at the same agency that closed that Minneapolis office in Chicago, and somebody wanted to move and they applied, they would get priority over other applicants with this CTAP. And if they applied at a different federal agency in Minneapolis, because that's where the office closed, if they applied for Social Security, Veterans Affairs, anything like that, then this section would apply. And when they apply for those jobs, they would get hiring preference over other candidates that had the same qualifications. So this is from HHS, and I mentioned this in another video, but first they're going to decide the competitive area. So which geographic area and which sections are going to be RIF'd. And then they'll determine the competitive levels, which is based on pay and job title description and stuff like that. So an example of this would be let's say the agency had a large IT department and they decided to get rid of that and outsource it to contractors, as many agencies do. Then the competitive area might be the IT department in New York and Washington, D.C. at XYZ agency. And then after they decide that, they will figure out the competitive levels based on job titles, salary, things like that, and whether you are in the competitive service or accepted, etc. And this is a link to the CFR, the Code of Federal Regulations that govern RIFs, and you can pull that up yourself if you're interested. And this is a visual representation of that. So if they're doing a RIF in this agency, in this city, in this area of responsibilities, it doesn't apply here, it doesn't apply here, even if it's in the same agency. And I think this document from HHS is a little easier to understand that concept. And the competitive level is the specific positions within the competitive area that compete with each other during a RIF. So for instance, my agency had several divisions, and in this division, there were several groups. So if they were doing a RIF in these 3 practice groups, it wouldn't affect these other 3 practice groups, and it definitely wouldn't affect other parts of the agency. So remember, we have the competitive area and then the competitive level, which is the people that are going to compete with each other in a RIF. And this is saying that all positions in the competitive area, which are the same grade or level and classification series, are competing with each other. So if you're in the VA, nurses compete with nurses, psychiatrists compete with psychiatrists, doctors compete with doctors, etc. And in that previous video where I talked briefly about bump and retreat, one thing which doesn't mention here or any of the other materials I've seen, you can bump sideways or down, but you can't bump up. So even if you have a very high number in the retention register because of your length of service and performance rankings and military service, if you're bumping or retreating, you can do it sideways or down. But if somebody is above you and they have a lower number in the retention register, you can't bump up. You can't bump yourself into a promotion. It has to be sideways or down. And the competitive level has to be similar enough in duties, qualifications, pay schedule, and working conditions. And the test here, when they offer you something, if they are doing away with your position in a RIF and they offer you something comparable, is whether that other position could be reassigned to a person without undue interruption. And that's not really defined anywhere, but I've seen anecdotally that generally that's if you can do something and be trained to do it within 90 days. So if I was a attorney, which I am, and they wanted me to work in IT, I couldn't do that because that would take more than 90 days to train me to do that. And if you've ever seen me work a computer, it might never be possible. But, you know, I worked in compliance here. And if they wanted me to do compliance in a different division, that can probably be done in 90 days. So that would qualify. And if you were in HR working on payroll, they might be able to transfer you to HR working on this documentation for hiring and firing, but they wouldn't be able to transfer you to something where you had no experience in and would take you more than 90 days to train you. This is very important when they determine your competitive level on the retention register. And I mentioned in a previous video that you have a right to see the retention register and see how you were scored and make sure everything in there is accurate. The competitive level determinations are based on your official position, not your personal qualifications. So why is that important? Let's say that you and I both work in payroll and I went to night school and got my MBA or CPA. That does not make me more qualified than you because that's not required for the position. So if we both have the same position, what's going to determine which of us stays and which of us goes is how we're ranked on that retention register based on prior military service, years of service in the agency, and your performance evaluations. It's not going to depend on other qualifications that you have that are not relevant to the position. So if I worked as an investigator in my agency and I was a paralegal and then I got my law degree and now I'm a lawyer performing this role, I don't get special treatment for that because that is not required for that. So when they're determining your competitive levels, it has to be divided by service. Are you competitive service or accepted? Those political appointees, the appointment authority, the pay schedule, your work schedule, full-time, part-time, seasonal, on-call. So if in a RIF, when they put people on the retention register, the full-time people compete with full-time people, part-time with part-time. So a part-time person couldn't take a full-time person's job or vice versa. And intermittent and seasonal, most people don't fall into that, but people who work in the national parks and stuff like that would apply to that. And there are also hourly workers. So if you're a welder or a machinist or something like that, you'd be in a RIF competing with other hourly workers. So that's, it would be according to the job title, your pay schedule, and how it's classified. So when they come up with this retention register, they're going to subdivide these three groups more, but they're going to divide people in the first cut into three groups. One are career employees who are beyond the probationary period. The second one, group two, are career employees who are in a probationary period or have less than 3 years under a competitive appointment, so career conditional. And group three are indefinite appointments, which are when somebody's hired on a billet that says, not to exceed X amount of months or something like that. And then these would get subdivided even smaller. And this is a special case. So if you're in a temporary appointment limited to a year or less, you're not considered to be a competing employee in a RIF, competing against other employees, unless you've completed 1 year of current continuous service under that temporary appointment with no break in service. Most people that wouldn't apply to. If I was still at the government, that might have been me because I did a temporary acting associate director and it was 9 months, so that's less than a year. But for most people, that's not going to apply. And this is very important. So all group 3 employees must be released before a group 2 employee can be reached, and all group 2 employees must be released before a group 1 employee can be reached. So imagine you're in a 3-story building and it's starting to flood. Everyone on the bottom floor is going to drown before anyone on the second floor gets drowned, and everyone on the second floor is going to drown before it gets to the top floor. And this is how they're going to subdivide the different subgroups. And I'll pause it here because I think this is sort of a lot to take in one shot. So I'll try to do another 10 or 15 slides tomorrow. And this part here gets a little complicated, so this is a good place to take a break. If you've spotted any inaccuracies or anything wrong, just leave it in the comments and I'll try to correct it. If there's too many things wrong, I'll just pull it out and redo it. As I've said in previous videos, I'm not an employment attorney and I'm definitely not your attorney. I early retired on a VERA and I have some familiarity with the process, and I have a law degree and an internet connection, and I have time on my hands, and I'm trying to help you guys out. And this seems to be something that's concerning a lot of you. And I've done videos on the stuff that I sort of have some working knowledge of, and this is something that is very specific, and I'm putting it out there because you guys have asked for it, but it's definitely not something that is 100% in my wheelhouse, and I'm looking at the materials and working through of it, but some of it, especially the regulations themselves, are not really clearly written, and it appears the current administration is not following all the rules, and they've done that before with past firings where they've gone to court and been hired back. And it looks like on some of this stuff, they're not following all the rules, but I think it's important for you to know the rules so that you can document what's going on. And then if you're treated unfairly, you can file a grievance or go to court, and then you have a good chance of getting hired back or getting this overturned or getting some other relief. So I think putting this out there a little bit at a time, I hope will be helpful to you guys. And I think me tackling this a little bit at a time is manageable for me as well. The way you eat an elephant is the way you eat anything else, one bite at a time. And I think if I had tried to do a 2-hour video, it wouldn't be possible, but I can tackle a little bit of this every day. And I will add a separate playlist on my channel with all this RIF stuff. So you guys can go over this in order and just sort of look at different things that you have questions about. And as with the other videos I've done, I'm going to put all the source documents from OPM or the Federal Register in the description so you guys can refer to it. And if you spot anything that I said that was incorrect, please leave it in the comments and I'll correct it. And if there's too many mistakes, I'll just redo the video. And I'll try to do another 10 or 15 of these slides in the next video where this one leaves off, and then we'll go from there. So if you have any questions about this video or things you want to see in future videos, just put it in the comments. There's a Buy Me a Coffee link in the description if you want to help out the channel, but don't feel like you have to. And definitely go to the source materials and double check anything I've said, and print out the source materials if you think they're helpful, and share them with your coworkers who are going through the same thing. Just stick together, because I know you guys aren't being treated fairly, and I think the way we win is we all stick together and do what we can to hold their feet to the fire and make sure that they follow the proper requirements and follow the law, and take them to task and go to court when they don't. So good luck out there.